So there are 4 determinants of cardiac output. Heart rate is number 1, or one of them. And these are not in any order as far as priority or as far as importance. I just started with heart rate because it's the simplest. So heart rate, and usually your heart rate is 60 to 100. Oh, sorry, that's a lot, isn't it? So then preload is a determinant of cardiac output. And remember what preload is. It's the volume within the ventricle at the end of diastole. You have an increased preload, you have an increased stroke volume. So I would make sure I know what my stroke volumes are if you want to look at this sheet. 60 to 100 milliliters. And our book might be a little different, I think. But it's just kind of a guide to let you know. And then I want you to also be mindful that this stroke volume's in milliliters and your cardiac output is in liters. So when you're doing any math that you might have to do, make sure you keep that in mind. You'll have to convert your milliliters to liters or your liters to milliliters if you're doing any kind of math. And it's simple math. It's usually just a division question. But you've got to convert that. All right, so you got your preload, and then you've got your afterload. And remember, afterload is after it goes through the ventricles, right? So it's the resistance the ventricles must overcome to pump blood to the body. So an example, you've got I was talking about this at clinical yesterday. You've got a 40-year-old male who has high blood pressure and he smokes. When you think about his vessels, they're constricted, right? So his afterload, his heart's going to have to work harder, right? So not only is he probably going to have increased heart rate, an increase might be 80-something instead of 68 or 70. All right, so he's got increased heart rate, so the heart's going to work harder, beat harder. And because of that, he's going to have a little, probably more increased volume than somebody that's an athlete, right? Because his preload's going to be a little higher because of the demand. Think about it as demand. And then his afterload, when he's got those constricted vessels, his heart is going to have to work harder to pump that blood out to the rest of the body. So think about it like there's a resistance there because of all the periphery is constricted. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So afterload is the resistance the ventricles must overcome. That is why when somebody has long-standing hypertension without medication management, their left ventricle gets bigger, because it's trying to work so hard to get that blood out. And then we've got, so that I just drew the arrows because that's your ventricles, right? The ventricles are pumping the blood out to the rest of the body. Or to all the body. All right, so you got your afterload that pumps the blood to the rest of the body, or to the body. Okay, so then the fourth determinant of cardiac output is contractility. And this is how hard the myocardium contracts. And the heart's a muscle, right? So how good a shape is that muscle in? Is there any damage? Is it atrophied? Is it too big? Is it dilated and it's too small? your your pump and your electrical working together, these determinants of cardiac output. Because your heart rate is partly, your SA node and your AV node helps with that. So that's partly electrical, but it all works together because you got to have the contractility as well. Does that make sense? I colored there the myocardium, your contractility, and that's how hard it has to contract, or how hard it does contract. Oh, okay, so I got this too. So this is, that's the whole slide. I can't back it up. I think I just took a picture of that one, of my other PowerPoint. So cardiac output is not 4 to 6. I mean, it is in some books, but it's 4 to 8 in your book. So your book is 4 to 8 liters per minute. And that's the amount of blood pumped by the heart in 1 minute, right? So your heart rate and your beats per minute, 60 to 100. Then your stroke volume, 60 to 150, and that might be in your book. So this one is not exactly by your book. It really depends on what book you're reading. I think even like Miss Burgess's videos, she might even say something different, 60 to 110 or something like that. But your stroke volume is 60 to 150 milliliters per beat. That's the volume of blood pumped with each ventricle. So you think that's a lot. That's a lot of blood, right? A lot of blood pumping through the ventricles. So I would know how to do this. That's why I put it on here. So your cardiac output equals your heart rate times stroke volume. And remember, your cardiac output is in liters per minute. Then you got your beats per minute and your milliliters per beat. So let's say you have a 75 heart rate, right? And your stroke volume is 70. And they want you to figure cardiac output. So you got to convert, right? Convert your milliliters to liters. And then you want to, or you can do it after. I did it after. So I just did 5250 divided by 1,000 is 5.2. So I did it. I think I did it after. So that's something you need to know, because I'm sure they're usually, if they don't